Hey guys, this is Jess Durham, and you are watching Pop Culture with Pat.
Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. So today, got a brand new guest on the show. Really excited to have Jess Durham. She's been in a bunch of stuff. The list goes on. You got Avengers Infinity War, you got Endgame, recent projects, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. She's going to be in the upcoming Fear Street. So, she's got a ton of credits to her name. Really excited to have her on the show. Thank you for coming on today, Jess.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you and cover some stuff that I've done. The list sounds so impressive when you say it out like that.
Yeah, like when I was like going through your credits, I was just like, man, like especially some of the movies like the recent stuff, but like Avengers Endgame, Infinity War. It's like those are like huge like movies, so it's definitely you got an impressive resume for sure.
I know it probably looks that way from the outside, but on the inside, for me as a stunt performer, I still feel very new and sort of like in my infancy of my career. But I have been very fortunate to work on some pretty amazing projects. So
Yeah, and so kind of just to start from the beginning, what was it that really led you to pursue a career as a stunt actor, and how did you get into the field?
oh man. First off, I don't know if I would qualify myself as a stunt actor. Acting is its whole other like facet that I am not fantastic at. Yes, we have to do kind of, we definitely have to have acting skills. We have to act like, what we're doing is, we're in pain or we're in this and we're in that. But acting is its own realm with some very talented people. But for me, I I think that my journey into stunts started well before I even knew what stunts was. I grew up a dancer. I danced all the way through my late teens, taught dance for a while, did theater and, chorus. I was the classic performing arts kid growing up. Every every facet of performing arts, I did it, and I did it with gusto. And uh, in college, I ended up doing, I got my bachelor in theater arts and cinema, and started really getting into staged combat and performing and choreographing movement and fights with and without weapons for staged productions. And that moved me then into working with the Society of American Fight Directors. That then sort of introduced me to people who also did stunts, because a lot of fight masters also are either stunt performers or stunt coordinators or work very closely with people in the stunt industry. And people were like, hey, have you ever thought about doing stunts? You've got great body awareness with dance, and you've got choreography with dance, and you've got this fighting thing going on. In my head, I was kind of like, stunts, that's a hobby, people don't do that for a living, because I had no idea. And the more I got to know it, and the more people I met in it, the more I realized, while I loved performing arts, I loved theater, I loved dance, there was always kind of like this little piece I didn't realize was missing. And stunts is like it's the pinnacle for me. It's still performing, it's still this, it's still that, but there's just something about creating these movements that, without stunts, there are so many films, thrillers, horrors, even comedies, they just wouldn't be the same without stunts.
Oh, yes.
And being a part of that, the smallest piece of that, is absolutely, it's fulfilling for me. So that's my very roundabout story of how I got into it.
Oh yeah, and it sounds like it seems like it was kind of like a natural progression, for you. But like you said, you were always kind of into performing arts and stuff like that, and just kind of seemed like everything was kind of like almost like the natural next like step for you as far as like what.
Always some kind of movement, something was happening in my life, whether it be dance or theater or my very small short stint in martial arts. It's my, I think 2013, which seems like a lifetime ago.
Oh
yeah. That's when I started doing live stunt shows. And that was kind of my first official, I guess, entrance into the world of stunts. And then 2017 would have been my introduction into film. So.
Gotcha. Okay. And yeah, I feel like stunts doesn't get, at least to me, it doesn't get the recognition that I feel like it deserves, especially after starting to talk to some of you guys like in like the field, I feel like it is a field that I feel it's starting to get like more appreciation. But there's still like a lot to like explore there. You guys, do so much. What are some of the biggest misconceptions as far as people outside of this field have about, people who work in like the stunt field?
That we're all daredevils outside of our jobs and that we're reckless and, that we just on a daily basis outside of work or just, setting ourselves on fire and jumping off buildings. Stunts is a very calculated risk because these stunts that you see, both big and small, have to be repeatable. And there are so many facets involved. It's not just the stunt performer, it's them, it's the actor, it's wardrobe, it's hair and makeup, it's camera, it's sound. There's a 1,000 people involved in that singular shot. And so we can't just go throwing things at the wall and hoping they stick. It's all very calculated, from the smallest, just falling to the ground, tripping and falling, to the big fire burns, falling off buildings, car wrecks. They're all very calculated. And so daredevil, not really. It's all very calculated risk. So I'd say that's probably the biggest misconception.
Yeah, I'll say you guys aren't just going out there every day and just doing Evel Knievel stuff, like, going to like
right,
whatever.
We're not just blowing things up on a random.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that even I'm still trying to learn. I want to continually be expanding my knowledge, expanding my skill sets, whether that's learning new skills or diving deeper into ones I already have, because I want to understand all sides of film that affect me. So I want to be better with camera and knowing camera angles and breaking down shots and breaking down scripts. And I want to know the rigging side of it. So if ever I'm on a wire and I'm in a harness, I'm not just blindly trusting this rig. I know exactly what's happening. I can look at it, understand what's happening, know how to ride it better by having that knowledge. So always constantly trying to educate myself.
That, and that makes, total sense. You just have to get a better understanding of all the the different aspects of, of filming. So is that something, would you, maybe down like the line, is that something, would you maybe want to even get, into some of those other aspects of the field, like whether it's like behind the camera, working, different things, like directing, things like that? Would you want to maybe like do that like down the road?
I mean, growth is always, a goal. And I absolutely know that performing is not the end of my line in film. I haven't landed on where I want to end up, what the pinnacle for me is. I think directing is amazing, but I also think that is just a completely different realm that takes a whole different set of skills that I'm still in the process of gaining and learning. And same with behind the camera. We shoot so much what we call like pre-visualization in stunts, which is what we do before it ever makes it to the set. We'll get the script, our coordinators will break it down, our fight coordinators will break it down, and we come up with the concepts for the fight and we shoot them in a rehearsal setting. And so that's us shooting it. We're not bringing in cameramen. It's the stunt performers that are shooting that. And so the better that we understand camera, whether or not, being behind the camera on set is something I want to do or not do, I still need to understand it, because we are shooting previs for, even the smallest of stunts, not just, stunt heavy, fight heavy shows.
Yeah.
So I, fight coordinating and assistant coordinating, stunt coordinating, all of that are all things that are on the ladder. And I'm obviously wanting to reach a different goal than where I am and continue to move up.
Yeah.
I just really don't know where yet. I'm super enjoying where I am right now, performing and working with, the incredible talent that's here in Atlanta. And I'm lucky enough that Atlanta's so busy. I get to work with people from all the hubs and I get to learn from them and grow from them, and hopefully also be sharing my knowledge and talents with them. And so one day, yes, is
Yeah.
the short answer, but who knows what and when.
Yeah, you never know. And it's always, it's always good to just like keep on learning, because you never know what opportunities, like might open up for you, and just kind of keep your mind open. And, you never know, you might just find something. It's like, hey, all of a sudden, like one day it's like, yep, this is something that I want to do for.
Right. Something completely random could just, rear its head. And then I go, I had no idea I wanted to do that. So the more knowledge and the more facets of film that I have, I think the happier I'll be.
For sure. And up to this point in your career, what have been some of the most like challenging stunts that you've had to do?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. Most challenging stunts. Some of the more challenging, and I'm using that word lightly, because there's physically challenging stunts, but then there's also mentally, and there's so many different, because some stunts are purely mental, they're not physical. And then there's vice versa. Some you just got to go for it, and there's no, you just got to get your mind right, and then it's your body takes over from there. I've been lucky enough to do a lot of superhero movies. And a lot of those have wire gags that aren't just you getting blown up and wrecking. Some of them are very controlled. And I think those kind of controlled flight path style wire gags can be some of the more both physically and mentally challenging, because you're up in the harness for forever. It's not exactly comfortable. And you have very specific movements that you have to accomplish while making it look effortless. And it is not effortless. But by no means are those, what I would call like the difficult stunts. They're just challenging in a different way. Now, like a big stair fall, those have its own challenges. Yeah. So I don't know if I can break it down to like, the most challenging stunts. They all propose their own, because even the smallest, just me tripping, they have to go, you have to land right here and nowhere else. And that in itself, while it's simple for us because that's our job, it's still not just as easy as, oh, we're going to have the stunt woman trip over this log and fall. Well, because then you got to fall into camera. You got to do it 15 times. It has to look the same each time. How was your arm the last time you fell? Now you have to show the actress how you landed. They all come with their challenges. And that's part of why I love what I do, because it's such a mixed bag of, what are you going to get today? What are you going to get to do today? Who are you going to get to work with? And, what are they like working with? So
yeah, no, I can definitely see that, as far as like each thing kind of having its own challenges. I can tell you one thing: I wouldn't make it in the stunt world, because at least as far as like the wire work and stuff, like, I mean, that's not, well, some stuff I'm sure is actually probably super high, but like I'm not a big fan of like heights. Like I'm not absolutely terrified of them, but yeah, so you wouldn't catch me like on those heights.
I don't know. I've met a couple stunt people who have a pretty intense fear of heights, and they still are very successful.
Still do it? Wow. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd be able to do that. I know we were kind of talking about, as far as, just things like different things like being like challenging. Has there ever been a stunt that you didn't end up doing or want to do because it was, it was like too dangerous or something?
I have been lucky enough that no. Every stunt that has been, presented to me to either previs or to perform has all been something in my wheelhouse, and something that I'm comfortable with. I know that there are stunts that I have seen that I go, I don't know if I would have done that on the day. And there are ones that I see that I go, man, I would have wanted to do that one. That one looks like so much fun. And, there's inherent danger in what we do every single day, from the simplest stunt to the most, daring and large stunts with all the moving parts. And coming into it with the respect of that inherent danger is, you get that little butterfly, that little, calm yourself before the storm, before you do the stunt. But as long as I can approach it with that respect, and as long as it's not crippling fear, then I know that I will be safe and be able to perform the stunt, because my body knows what it's doing. I've trained for it, or I've trained the pieces of it, because there's stunts out there you absolutely cannot train for, but you can train the pieces of it and you can train the prerequisites for it.
Yeah.
So as long as I trust myself and I know that the difference between the respect of the danger and the fear of the danger and the difference between the two, then I'm good to go for the stunt. And so far, there's been none where I had to walk away from it. Some required more mental preparation than others, but none that I had to just flat out to call.
Yeah. No, and I'm sure, yeah, there's definitely, I'm sure some where it's just like, oh man, like, am I actually gonna like do this as you're getting ready to, you know, to like while you're on set and getting ready to actually like do the stunt itself. So, what are, and as far as like, because I know I've talking to, you know, I mentioned like James Jude Courtney, and he's kind of mentioned some of the like injuries and stuff that he's had. Like, have you ever had like any like serious injuries or anything like that as far as like your career goes, or?
I mean, bumps and bruises and scrapes and cuts, those are just tools of the trade.
Yeah.
But you know, I've hurt my ankles, my shoulders. I've had a whole nother career before this as a dancer and an actor on stage, and I came into stunts with some already existing injuries, and so I'm not exactly kind to my body in what I do. So I think I've been very fortunate to not walk away with anything too incredibly serious. No long-term hospitalizations, no injuries that require any sort of long-term rehab.
Yeah.
I think the biggest one so far has been my ankle, you know, and I continually train and, you know, work my body, staying physically fit. I have a physical therapist I see on the regular to prevent further injuries. And again, as soon as I see something that I know that my body and my mind and my skills are not prepared for, I hope that I have the wherewithal to say, I can't do this. I'm afraid this is going to be an injury and I'm not going to give you what you want. You know, this is for someone else and not for me. So.
And I think, you know, it sounds like with that too, I think a lot of, you know, we've kind of talked about that. With this, you know, this type of like field, this kind of work, you know, it takes there's a lot of like prep work, training and stuff like that that goes into it too. So I feel like going into it, you know, you try to prepare yourself the most that you possibly can, so that way you guys are able to hopefully avoid like any of these like kind of like injuries. So it seems like you guys, there's definitely a lot that goes into it before you actually do these like stunts too.
Oh, absolutely. Being on set and in front of the camera is barely half of what my job is. You know, most of the time half my job is being not on the clock and making sure I'm in the gym and that I'm physically fit enough to perform the job, learning new skills, keeping skills I already have, you know, up to snuff to perform in front of the camera, you know, making sure that I come prepared mentally and physically to every job that I show up to. Because there's been times when I've been called and it's something not specifically in my wheelhouse, or maybe something I've never, you know, worked into a performance before. And so if I have time, I will train it, get it somewhere where I'm like, absolutely, this is camera ready. And so it's just a constant evolution of yourself being in this industry.
Yeah. And you kind of briefly mentioned it, you know, like earlier, as far as like just some of the different like people and stuff you work with. As far as this was something that I really was really curious about, as far as, you know, like working, you know, with actors and being like a stunt double. What is that like, you know, collaboration process like for you? I mean, I'm sure it like obviously differs from, you know, actor to actor, but is there anything that where it's like, you know, you're going into like work with someone, is there anything that you always like to do like first thing with, like you meet them, or just like how does that process like kind of work for you?
It is different from project to project and from actor to actor. It is absolutely different. And being a good stunt double is a specialty skill all of its own. And I have been lucky enough that I've gotten the opportunity to double some absolutely incredible actresses, and each one has their own, you know, the way that they like to interact with their doubles. Some, I get very close to, and I work very intensely with them prior to the shoot. Like Emily VanCamp, I had the opportunity to double her for Falcon and the Winter Soldier as Sharon Carter. And Emily put in so much work to bringing that character to life through her movements and her fights. And of course, being so heavily in the fight rehearsals, we got very close, and we had a very very tight relationship, lots of trust and respect between us. And that's one side of the spectrum. On the other, I might be coming in for a singular day to do one thing for an actress who I might not even ever be on set with. And so there's a full spectrum of what you may come into, but I always want to make sure that I have everything they need to keep themselves safe. So if they need any safety pads, elbows, knees, anything like that, if they have to take any sort of fall, making sure they're comfortable with the movement or the stunt that they need to do, and making sure that I'm doing their movement justice, because I'm not myself when I'm on camera. If I'm doubling, I'm them. And so if I have the opportunity to study that character's movement and how that actor has brought that character to life, and trying to respect that and not just make up my own style and try to interject what I think it should be, but creating a happy in between of what they have decided they want that character to be and what I can do safely in the stunt.
Yeah, and that was like one of the things that I, when I thought of that, it's just like it's such a fascinating thing to me, because as a stunt double, you're working with this other person to bring this character to life, and it's like you can't have one person really doing like one thing and then one person doing another, because it's like otherwise it's like people can tell, it's like, oh well, like what's going on, like the character was asking or acting this way as far as like their movements and stuff go, and now all of a sudden they're doing something like crazy like over here, and it just seems like really like out of character. So yeah, I was really curious just like how that kind of like works, and it's like, yeah, do you have to like study like their movements and stuff like that goes? So thank you.
You have to be a really good mimic, and you have to be willing to put in the time, especially if you're going to double someone for the full length of a show. If you're going to double someone for the full length of a show, especially on a movement heavy show, you have to put in the time and the effort. Luckily, Emily and I got to work together in creating who Sharon Carter was going to be. I think you can really see that, and that it melds very well together when it's Emily and when it's me. And but then there's times where I absolutely do not have the luxury of studying ahead of time and getting to know the actor or getting to know the character, and I just have to do my best with what I do know, and with the director's directions, and with my stunt coordinator's directions, and creating it on the fly very quickly, and then you're just thrown into it. So
yeah,
you never know.
Yeah, and as far as Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as far as specific scenes, so did you, and this is me, like I guess like kind of assuming, so correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as did you get to work with her as far as the fight scene where she's taking down like all of the different henchmen and stuff like outside, like
the Madripoor container fights?
Yeah. So did you get to work on like on her with that, like that scene?
So our fight training was focused on the majority of getting that fight down, because those fights, because we knew from reading all of the scripts that was Sharon Carter's big moment of showcasing, kind of who she is now as a fighter, because she is not, this trained assassin like Black Widow. She does not have superpowers like Captain Marvel does. She's this in between where, yes, she has training through SHIELD and whatnot, but she does not have the super soldier serum. She's not superhuman in any way. And we had to show that, but we also had to show that she was a badass. So, what that looked like. And we came up with this very, and also Emily's abilities playing off of what she's best at. And she's no stranger to action. She's played action characters before and has experience with stunts and fights, which makes my job so much easier. And she has fun with it. She likes doing it. And she's very good at it. And so we focused a lot on those fights. We landed on 6 vignettes that we had ready to go on the day. We didn't know which 6 we were going to actually get to perform. So both Emily and I, and then the people we were fighting, the stunt performers, the henchmen and the bad guys, were all ready to go. There were 6 possibilities of what we could shoot, and we ended up getting those 3 in. And honestly, after I saw it, they didn't cut much out. Those are pretty full on what they were. And there's I believe it's the last one that she does that is 100% her. I did 1 take of it for the wide shot, and the rest of that, because of the way they filmed it, and it was very much on her face, that one was all her. The rest of them, one of them was all me, one was all her, and then one of them was the mix of us. So when Emily does her interviews and she says how much she did and how much work she put into it, she's not kidding. She did so much work and she crushed it. The fights came out really great.
Oh yeah, both of you guys too. I mean, that fight scene like was definitely, for like the show, like great show like overall, but that fight scene was definitely like one of the highlights, of that episode, that show. So I mean, great job to both of you guys. And I was kind of trying, because I went back to watch it and kind of like see if I could tell, but there's definitely like there's some shots where it's like, oh man, it's kind of like on her face. So it's like, is that Jess there? Is that like Emily? Like, like cool to get that, the perspective, like where obviously like you were on there and working with her and just like how much work, she put into it.
So much.
That definitely, yeah, like you said, it helps make your job like a little bit easier when someone has that training or that, that like previous ability as far as like filming a scene goes. You also, I mean, you worked with like a number of like different like actresses, but you also got to be a stunt double, I believe I saw, for Karen Gillian for Nebula. Is that correct?
Yes, I got to be Nebula for some of the Infinity War reshoots, but mostly for Endgame. Mm-hmm. And that was an incredible experience. I have been lucky enough to be in the Marvel family since Thor Ragnarok and have done several projects since then. But Nebula is such this iconic character. Everyone, you either love her or you hate her. But I think since, she's kind of flipped the script and she's kind of a good guy now, I think most people adore that character because her kind of like this, the robotic, sort of badass mean girl is now plays into so much of the comedy of the movies now because she's with all the good guys, but her intentions have never changed, like who she is.
Yeah.
So she's always, now she's got this kind of comedic relief for just being who she's always been.
Yeah.
And Karen was fantastic. Of course you see Karen in a ton of action films, and I'm lucky enough to be a small part of that in helping beat Nebula. And she's had a ton of doubles as Nebula because she's been in so many movies.
Yeah.
So to be a small cog in that machine was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I mean, what was I guess like your favorite part in helping bring Nebula to life for this movie, and also like favorite scene that you remember like working on like with her?
My favorite part of Nebula is her movements, because she's so just like matter of fact, and she's just there to get the job done, whatever that is. And so it's very fun to kind of play with that in fights and the directness. And she's part robot. She's got this arm that can do whatever. And so playing with that is always so much fun when you have some sort of special ability you have to work into it. And then as far as a scene, it has to be the Women of Marvel scene in Endgame. To see the gathering of all of these incredible women, these characters was, I can only imagine being like a little girl in the theater and looking at all of these female superheroes. And some of them being super soldiers, some of them being aliens, some of them being just humans, and them all coming together in that scene had to be incredible to watch. Oh, and yeah. I loved being a part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, just like, between this and Infinity War, it's like you've Yeah, I know we kind of like talked about it, and it's like you don't necessarily like really think about it kind of like maybe at the time, but it's like you've got a chance to be a part of these two of the biggest movies, not just like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but two of the biggest movies in, the history of like cinema as far as, like box office and impact goes. So I mean,
Right.
when
And
did
that's my job. Like that's my job. That's why I think it doesn't hit me until after, because I'm there and I'm working. That's my job.
Yep.
And it's incredible to kind of get lost in that sometimes. And it has been quite the ride so far, and I'm very excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, and I know, like, for me myself, like, obviously you can see, like, I don't know, like behind, I got like the Infinity War, and I got like the Endgame posters up there. Big Marvel fan. I got like a WandaVision shirt on, so I've been.
My one of my very dear friends is Elizabeth Olsen's stunt double, CC Ice. She's
Oh wow.
an absolutely incredible stunt woman, and Liz was amazing. I got to work with her a lot, and honestly, I got to work so closely with so many of those amazing actors through the Marvel Cinematic Universe. All of them absolutely incredible people. And you get to that level of that level of actor and celebrity, and you expect there to be some sort of maybe like star-struck moments. But honestly, once you get in there, we're all just there doing our jobs, and there's no we're all making this movie together.
Yeah, you guys, I mean, you're just people like everyone else. This is the job that you do, for like a living. But I mean, at the same time, you guys have, everyone that's like a part of the set, even the people, like behind the scenes, like, behind the camera and things like that. It's like you guys all contributed to this huge part of, movie like history. I remember for myself seeing both of those movies at like one of the, like up here, we have a theater. It's like the biggest IMAX theater. Like I think like in New England, I'm pretty sure. So like saw that both of those films like opening night, and it's just like I can't, unless like I'm sure Marvel's going to build back up to something like that again at some point. Like it's going to take a while, but just like seeing those two movies on opening night, having the crowd and just like the reaction to some of those like specific moments, I just getting goosebumps like talking now, but like something I'll never forget. Did you like obviously did you get to go to like the premiere and stuff, and did you get to kind of like experience that?
I didn't go to the premiere, but we did have for both movies smaller premieres here in Atlanta, since most of the crew was from Atlanta, and a lot of the main stunt group was there, and we were able to kind of marvel at this film that we had made and see it. I think it was at the Fox Theater here in Atlanta, from what I can remember. At least the Infinity War was. And it was, this incredible thing to see your creation that, because I mean, when you do so many TV shows and you do film, some of them are smaller than others, and that, and that's great. You get to work in the full spectrum of, this is a small TV show to this is the biggest grossing film in the world, and each one is just as important as the other. And so you get to see these creations, and you see that these people are appreciating the work you've put into it, and knowing, like the Marvel films, the mere scope of how many people are going to watch it, with even the new streaming shows like Loki and Falcon Winter Soldier and WandaVision, they've been massive. The response has been huge, and so it's a little humbling to know that you had a piece of that. You were a part of that. So
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, I mean, it's been going on like a decade plus now. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's become such this like huge thing, and you've, obviously, like you said, you've gotten to work on like several different projects. What's your favorite thing about being a part of like this universe?
the fact that Marvel, like you said, it's Endgame was a decade plus in the making. They didn't try to rush anything. They made sure that you had a connection to every single character, to every single bad guy. They didn't just throw Thanos at you and expect you to care who he was. You got little snippets of him throughout, and you got to learn who he was and what his intentions were and his relationship to the entire universe. And being a part of such a well calculated and thought out universe, and the multiple stories and how they interact with each other, is probably my favorite part, because they're not just, throwing stuff at you and expecting you to care. They make sure that they are facilitating every question you have about these characters and pulling them from the comics. Because people have been a fan of Marvel way before the cinematic universe of Marvel.
Yeah.
And the fact that they can keep an audience of such a wide age range engaged for so long, people have been engaged with this for so many years, is no small feat. So yeah. Marvel definitely did it right.
Yeah, no, it's wild too. Especially like now watching with the streaming services, where we're getting to get some of these stories that focus like a little bit more on some of the like characters that maybe didn't get as big of a moment to shine during like the movies, and just seeing some of those bits of like stories and stuff that are coming back from like years and years ago. And it's like, that's
exactly
brought back. I've said this before too, because I've talked to other people that have been like involved with the Marvel like cinematic universe, and it's just like, as far as like the writing goes, I can't imagine being a writer for some of these projects and just like having to kind of map this all out and be like, oh yeah, like this happened like 10 years ago, remembering this and bringing it back like for like a current like project. So yeah, hey, hats off to you guys as far as like everyone involved is with the universe.
Well, I imagine the writers having like the most intense kind of like, those crime scene rooms where it's just pictures and red yarn connecting everything. And exactly. I can't even imagine. There's so much lore and so many relationships and timelines to have to keep up with. It's insane.
100%. Yeah, no, I can't even like imagine it. And one of your to transition, I guess, away from like Marvel, going into one of your other most recent projects that is actually in theaters right now, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. You got to work with Vera Farmiga, and you were her stunt double in the movie, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, what was it like, working with her? She's done, film for like a while, and getting to work on like, this, storied horror franchise that, it's on its third film. It has its own universe.
So it does.
Her.
What a rock star she is. Loved working with her. Such a legend, in the acting world, and such a gracious person to work with. She, of course, in a horror film, it's not quite as grand of a scope as what you would get with, say, action movies or superhero movies, but still absolutely just as important, the stunts, because in horror films, you have a lot of like possessions and, people flying through the air at, not under their own will and things like that. And in this most recent one, we had the cliff scene, which was a huge thing, made it into most of the trailers, or at least the first part of it did. And then you have the hallway scene, if you recall that, when she goes down into the catacombs and she falls and there's another of her. Yep. That's actually me. Oh, the one in front of her is me. Okay. And that's that part of that movement thing. We had to develop this. It seems so simple, she falls, she gets up, she starts to look around, and then that's not CGI. That was her and I working together, and me mimicking her movements to as perfect as I could. Yeah. Because I was not done with a computer.
That's so.
And as simple as it seems, that's one of the most, that was another challenging thing, not because the stunt was difficult, but it was just, I had to be that person, and that was so much fun to develop that with her. And she was a big part of, that scene. Michael Chavez, he was super excited about that hallway scene. So we put a lot of time and effort into that.
And that's funny, like you saying that, because, when watching the movie, that was something where I was like, I figured there was some kind of camera trickery or some kind of CGI or something. So that's really cool to find out you were actually like in that, scene, because I was curious what particular like scenes you were in. I kind of like assumed like you were possibly in like the cliff scene.
Yeah.
I assumed that one. But yeah, I had no idea. Wouldn't have thought for the hallway scene. So that's really cool. Now, what about the so the cliff scene? Like, how did that kind of like all work? You know, filming that.
So that was a ton of fun. We had a blast doing that. So Patrick's a rock star, Patrick Wilson, and that is him all the way. His stunt double, who's actually my significant other, funny enough. Um, he did that whole scene by himself, the dive to catch her and all that. He did it all. The cliff was built. It's a styrofoam cliff and then sprayed over with a concrete type material. So you're up there, they've got, trees on it and it's all dressed, and then it's all a blue screen. It's in this massive sound stage. And so, you got to climb up the flights of stairs to get to the top of it. So the cliff itself, the scenery, the lake and all of that is not real. That is all CGI, but beautifully done. And we fell off that cliff. I had a harness on for safety, and the shot of the feet getting pulled, that was my foot doing all that great foot acting. And then of course the fall to the ground is me. That is Vera sliding. She did the parts that she could, and it looks fantastic cutting in and out. And then the part of me actually going over and hanging, that is me. And then her getting pulled up is her. That's one of those things where you work so closely with your actor and you study them. I luckily had several movies prior to this to study her movement and how she is Lorraine Warren, and was able to really kind of portray that as closely as I could. So I was very lucky. That made my job much easier, having something to study. And before I even, got into that role, and it was a blast. That was a fun one.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds like a lot of fun. Not just, I mean, like obviously like the hallway scene that you're telling me about, which I would have had like no idea, but then getting to work with like your significant other as well, like doing like the stunts for like Patrick Wilson, that must have been like a blast, because I imagine it doesn't necessarily probably happen like all the time where like people like get to like do that work with like a significant like other on like a project. So that must have been like a lot of fun too.
Oh, we had a blast. And our stunt coordinator is also a close friend of ours. And on horror films, it's a much smaller cast usually. And so the crew was super tight knit. The director was absolutely amazing. He made that entire project so, he let stunts be such a big part of it. Not only just the stunts, but like the development of movement that a lot of the times on other movies we wouldn't have anything to do with, but he respected our work so much and loved what we were doing that he wanted us to be a part of so many different pieces of the movie. And he was so thankful to every department, knowing that, each one of the departments had such a huge impact on making that movie what it is. And so that was, to date, one of my favorite projects to work on the length of, because of how close and small that kind of family became, the crew and the cast became. And
now this might be, I mean, I feel like it might just kind of make sense because both of the genres, I guess, have like a good amount of action. But, looking at like your resume, you obviously have done a lot of work in like, like the superhero comic book field, and then like a good amount of like horror stuff as well. Is that by coincidence, just because there is like a lot of like stunt work that goes into that, or are those like two are like your favorite kind of like genres like as well?
Both. It's purely by coincidence, but then it's making my job that much more fun because I love both of those genres. Yeah, it's purely by coincidence that I have been so blessed to meet the people to help me become a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and stay there. A lot of that has been through the same stunt coordinator, Monique Anderton, who was an incredible performer and has now become a stunt coordinator and second unit director, and she's one of the many stunt women who are just blowing doors open for those of us who are a few years behind them. And she's been my coordinator on several of these Marvel projects. She is the coordinator for the Loki series that has just been released. And she was my coordinator for Endgame. But not only have I worked for her, I've worked with her. So not a coincidence that I've been in so many Marvel films, just I have met the right people who know that Marvel's a family, and then Marvel stays very close. Yep. And, you know, I work with a lot of the same people over the years, which has been fantastic. Some of the top-notch stunt performers of the industry, and I've gotten to work and learn from them over the last 5 years, and it's been amazing. And then horror films are a blast. They're so much fun to work on because you have those possession scenes. We got to work with some great contortionists on The Conjuring, the upcoming Fear Street.
Yeah, I know you. So I know you can't obviously, you know, because it still hasn't come out, but like I am super excited for that. I know, like I saw like on IMDb that it looks like I believe you're going to be like a stunt double for like Maya Hawke.
Yes.
So that I know obviously you can't really get into that because it hasn't come out yet. But yeah, I'm really, because I'm a big like Marvel fan, but I'm also a big like horror fan. I grew up watching it's funny because I never got into Fear Street because I think at the time like I like Goosebumps, and Fear Street I think was kind of aimed for like a little bit like older. So I might miss it. But like seeing the trailers and stuff, I just did like a reaction for it. I'm so excited for that. So I can't wait to see. And I'm definitely gonna have to try and keep an eye out for what you've done like in the film for sure.
Oh, I can tell you I had a blast working with Maya and with that crew. Maya is fantastic, and it's funny, we had fun, you know, working together for my short stint on Fear Street. But I also got to double her mother years ago.
Oh, wow.
I doubled Uma Thurman for a movie called War with Grandpa. Which was one of my first movies here in Atlanta that I got to do. So we bonded over that as well. But I'm excited for Fear Street. I know so little about it because it's 3 separate movies, and I was only a part of one of them.
Yeah.
And so I'm very excited to see, because I had many friends, very close friends, who were, you know, a huge part of it, and I'm excited to see all the work that they did for this.
Oh yeah, no, it's just one of those things. It's like, you know, for me, it's like, oop, this like takes me back to, you know, my childhood. You know, just kind of gives me that fun, you know, nostalgia, but like horror summer vibe, and it's just like I am totally all that, you know, all there for that. So I can't wait for that to come out. As far as, I mean, that's one of your like projects, you know, kind of to, you know, to wrap things up, because I don't, you know, want to keep you like too long. As far as you know, other projects, where can you know, fans that you're able to speak of, where can fans like catch you, you know, going forward?
Well, you can. I don't even know what episode it was, but keep an eye out for me in some of the later episodes of Loki. I did get the amazing opportunity to work on that. 2020 has done my head in, and I don't know what of my projects I've worked on have released and have not.
Hey, that's totally fair.
If you follow Jamie Foxx on Instagram, he has been posting a lot about a project, and that particular one I just wrapped and was on that for the last, I don't know, since February. that was a big project, lots of fun. Follow Jamie Foxx and take a look at some of the stuff he's been posting, some behind the scenes stuff. What else? Such a crazy couple of years. Conjuring, of course, finished. Project I was working on before the COVID shutdown. What else? Loki. What is released? Fear Street coming out.
I was to say, I know last year definitely like threw everybody off, because it's like what happened like last year? Like
2020 doesn't exist in my mind. I worked on a pilot that got picked up, so hopefully I'll get to work on that again. And it's so strange. There are things that you know, I filmed, I feel like years ago, that are just now being released, Conjuring being one of them. And so my brain's not currently working. But yes, the Conjuring came out fantastic. I hope that everyone who is a fan of that universe is, you know, happy with how it came out and that it stays true. It is different than some of the other Conjurings in that universe, but I think in a good way. You kind of get to see the Warrens process a little bit more, I think, and how they're involved with it. And it's not so much about the entity as it is the people, which I still lots of jump scares. I was watching next to a girl who was like watching through her shirt. So we still did our jobs.
Yeah, and I think with that film, it's definitely, that was like one of the highlights for the film for me, was like, you just really get to see like, you know, their relationship and what those characters, what they're willing to like do for each other and how, you know, how far they're like willing to go. So that was definitely like one of the highlights of that movie for sure. And it, out of the other, you know, the other two, I would say, like, obviously we got to know them in part one and part two, but this film, I think, focuses the most on like their relationship as far as like a movie goes.
I agree. And I have to say that I think that's the first like major horror film that I've been a part of that has released and was like you know, had a fan base already. And so I don't get nervous very often for a release of a film or a TV show, but I was a little nervous as I know this has like a big following, and I was like, man, I hope we don't disappoint anybody.
Yeah.
So
no, yeah. And as far as so I mean, horror fans definitely, I would say, you know, Marvel like obviously has, you know, passionate fans too, but the horror community's got some like pretty passionate like fans as far as, you know, just like overall, but I mean specifically like the Conjuring universe like too. So but that's funny because it's, you know, again, it's like which, you know, again, it's your job, but it's like you've worked on these like huge projects for like, you know, for Marvel and stuff, and then like Infinity War and Endgame, and you're like, oh, like I was a little nervous, you know, for the Conjuring like coming out.
well, I think because, you know, these Marvel projects are so massive that you can kind of feel like you disappear into them because there are so many people and it's on such a large scope. And then something like The Conjuring that has a much smaller cast, a much smaller team of stunt performers, and you don't have that ability to kind of disappear into it so much. I mean, you know, the list of stunt performers on Endgame is 200 plus long, where the one on Conjuring is, you know, it's very small on screen and you can see everybody's name all at once. And so it's a little, the smaller scope of it, even though it's still a massive horror film, you know, it made me kind of nervous. I was looking around in the theater, you know, because I finally got to go see a movie in the theater again, and I was kind of looking around and I was making sure everyone was scared. I was like, we're scaring you, right? You're terrified.
Are you not entertained?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, very much. Because you want to like hide, and then you know, you're like, oh God, it's me, it's my part. Oh, is it going well? Is everyone enjoying it? Especially, you know, something like The Conjuring, where it's very much, I can look and go, that's me on the screen. They don't know it, but that's me.
Yeah. No, I completely understand that. Like watching yourself, you know, like for me, when it's like, you know, doing like these videos on YouTube, the worst, and you know, it's also fun, but like editing like yourself and just like, you know, it's like you're looking at yourself and you're just like, oh, like I don't like how that came out or whatever. But yeah, no, so
you're always your own worst critic, and it's like people hate the sound of their own voice.
Yeah,
it's a necessity, but I hate watching myself because I'm always like, you pick out the smallest. You're like, oh, what's, you know, you're in this massive fight scene. And you're like, what's my hand doing? Well, you're the only one looking at that hand. No one else is looking at that. They're looking at the grand scope of it all. But
exactly,
you know, watching yourself is a big part of learning, you know, more about yourself as a performer and where you can, you know, improve. So as much as I can't stand it and it gives me anxiety, I still have to do it.
Yeah. And, you know, just as far as, is there anything else that, you know, just as far as like the fans out there, is there anything else that you just want to say to them, you know, to kind of wrap things up?
You know, I love that I get to be a part of this industry and be in film, which is the coolest job in the world. You know, I get to, you know, help be a part of one of the biggest industries in the world that, you know, touch so many people in so many different ways, and to be just the smallest piece of that is incredible. And to everyone who enjoys the projects that I've been on, you know, you're the true superheroes. You're the reason we do it. to have the fans and the audiences, you know, engaged in what we do. There'd be no point if there weren't fans of these films. So you guys are the rock stars.
Well, hey, and you know, thank you again, Jess, for for coming on to do this. I know, like you mentioned you've been super busy. You know, we've got a bunch of different projects and stuff like coming out. So thank you so much for for taking time to come on and do this show. You know, I really appreciate it. Like I said, I love getting to kind of the backstories and the little things that some people they don't necessarily everyone like sees like right away. I love hearing the behind the scenes stuff. So it was really cool to kind of shed a little bit more light on this like particular like field like stunts. Like I mentioned, it's something that doesn't get enough recognition as I feel like it should, but I do feel like it's headed in that right direction. So thank you for
we are there's been a lot of actors recently shouting out their doubles. We recently had Liz and them on I think it was the MTV, was it the MTV Awards, that they were shouting out their stunt doubles. Catherine Hahn and Liz were shouting out their doubles. You've had Brie Larson shouting out her doubles from Captain Marvel. Emily has been gracious enough to mention my name in several of her interviews. And there's been some traction, and I don't think any stunt performer really wants. We're not out of here, out here doing this for the notoriety of anything. We want to do our jobs. We want to make our actors look good. We want to be safe and have everyone go home at the end of the day, happy and healthy with the work that they've done. And so it's great that we're getting more recognition because it is such a big part of the industry. But none of us, I don't think any of us are out here trying to be famous. That's what the actors are doing, and they're great at it.
That's fair. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate you doing this. And hey, you guys, make sure to, if you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and go follow Jess too. Follow her on, she's on Instagram. Give her a follow on there. I'll put, like a link to that down in the description below. And thank you guys again for joining us on this episode of Pop Culture with Pat.
Thanks, guys. Hey, guys, this is Jess Durham, and you are watching Pop Culture with Pat.